If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us bring you more content like this. You can find this episode and all of our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. See the show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading news.
Welcome back to Rounding Up the Roundhouse. This is the Journal's Legislature podcast. It's January 22nd, and we're on day 3 of the 30-day session. I'm joined by Dan Boyd, our Capitol reporter, and it's been a busy week so far, but wanted to start by asking you, Dan, about sitting down with the governor yesterday. How'd that go?
Yeah, so I was able to sit down and talk with Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham yesterday on the second day of the session, and spoke a little bit about kind of the agenda she laid out in her State of the State address on opening day, but also kind of some of her thoughts about her legacy. It was a pretty wide-ranging interview, and I think people will be interested in it. One takeaway that I really had from it is just that she really thinks that passing medical malpractice changes are crucial. And direct quote was, "I'm not leaving this job without medical malpractice reform." So what that means for the 30-day session, I think we'll see. I mean, there have been some bills filed on that issue, but far from a given that anything is approved before legislators adjourn next month. And she even suggested being willing to call legislators back for a special session if there isn't a bill passed, which I think not a lot of legislators want to hear that at this point in the session, but really made it clear that that's a priority for her, and she's willing to kind of go to the mat on that issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know she said on her State of State address that she loves the special session, so that sounds like a distinct possibility. Did she talk about universal child care?
Yeah, she talked about that as well, and that's an issue we've covered, and it's shaping up to be one of the bigger kind of budgetary fights of this session. She said she's optimistic. She said she understands legislators' kind of reluctance to funding a new initiative proposed by a governor, especially a governor in their final year. But she said she expressed confidence. That she's bullish about them approving some of the funding for this, and really said that this initiative is getting a lot of support around the state from New Mexicans, and she really feels confident that it would be a positive impact for a lot of parents around the state. I think that said, we'll see. They're still pretty far apart on the budget, and in a 30-day session, things move pretty quickly. So I think she's still got to make that case to legislators, but she said she's not pessimistic about that, the outcome of it.
Okay, and then I know today's been a pretty busy day as well. Tell me about, I know you've been here most of the day. What's been happening around the Roundhouse today?
Yeah, we've already seen a few bills advancing both in the House and Senate. Medical compact bills passed, Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday, and then a few passed the House Committee as well. We're expecting the Senate to take up some bills on the floor session Friday, which is pretty rare for the Senate to act that quickly on legislation. That includes one of the compact bills, a road bonding package that's also gotten attention. So kind of following through on their promise to fast track some of these bills. We'll see if they kind of have the same momentum going over to the House side, but at least so far, I think the plan is kind of playing out how legislative leaders said it would. And usually in the first week of sessions, we have that opening day festivities and then a lot of bill introductions and kind of quiets down. But actually seeing some movement this week on bills, which is not always typical.
Mm-hmm. And then yesterday, I know was Public Safety Day, and I sort of took point on that. Just to remind listeners, this is my first time as a journalist being in the Roundhouse, and so it's been quite a trial by fire, but a really interesting experience. I spent some time covering public safety up in Taos for about 5 years, so it was interesting to hear what police officers and other members, leadership throughout the state had to say about sharpening up some of the criminal code in the state. That discussion was partly led by Jason Bowie, who was a 2021 governor's appointee. Bowie is the public safety secretary, and he really, stood behind GOP leaders where it comes to increasing penalties for a range of different issues. There's about a dozen bills filed right now in the Roundhouse, covering everything from pretrial detention to firearms and other forms of legislative change. I know one of the big ones was increasing the penalty for aggravated battery upon a peace officer. We've seen a number of instances of officers who've been shot, officers who've been killed in the state in the line of duty. So that is, which bill was that? That was House Bill 61 is one that we're going to be keeping an eye on that elevates that charge, aggravated battery against a peace officer, from a third-degree felony to a second-degree felony. But there's really been an aggressive push, or looks like there will be an aggressive push where it comes to public safety and crime reform, which I know is something the governor also outlined in her speech. Did that come up in your discussion with her yesterday, Dan?
Yeah, it did. And some of those bills that you just kind of mentioned and outlined, the governor, especially in her second term, has really made public safety more of a priority. And she's had a difficult time convincing members of her own party, to advance some of these bills. There have been some public safety bills approved, but a lot of others have fallen by the wayside or kind of stalled, due to some disagreements. One issue that she did mention and has come up before is kind of juvenile justice and when it comes to youthful offenders, kind of whether to increase some of the penalties and increase accountability, while at the same time kind of trying to improve prevention efforts and treatment. So that's been something that so far the legislature's had a difficult time kind of threading that needle. And she did talk about that and just kind of the challenges of CYFD, which have, been a major issue during her 7 years as governor. And she does think, that agency's on better footing right now. I don't know if all legislators would agree with that, but she also said she's hopeful that, that legislators can take some action, especially on juvenile justice was one issue that she mentioned in this session. And, we'll see if there's the appetite to do that and the kind of ability to strike a compromise that, both sides can agree with.
Yeah, and we'll be following those bills and may bring in Nikayla McClelland, who's our public safety reporter, to help out with some of that coverage as well. Just sort of moving into day one, that was really interesting to hear just the sort of bipartisan messaging that was coming from, of course, both sides of the political aisle. I was sitting in the Senate, you were sitting in the House, and House and Senate leaders were both really sounding that note of cooperation. That really struck, I think, both of us, right, Dan?
Yeah, I know you wrote a story kind of just on some of the calls for civility from legislative leaders on that opening day. I mean, clearly we live in a pretty polarized political environment nationally, but also in New Mexico, and we'll see if that call for cooler heads can prevail during the session. But at least to kind of starting off the session with that note, and the governor kind of sounded a similar tone during her State of the State address. She aired a video to start off her speech featuring her and four former governors, most of them Republicans, and kind of calling for bipartisanship and the need to work together. And I think that was an intentional tone that she kind of struck to try to be, put aside some differences and try to find, solutions to some of these issues. We'll see if how that works. I know there will be disagreements but yeah, I was kind of curious your thoughts on the opening day festivities and, your first State of the State address. It seemed like you navigated it all pretty well.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that. I think the first thing I was struck by was just the sheer scale of the event in here. I walked in, I think the north side entrance, and there was just this massive crowd of people just lining that hallway to get to the house to see the mariachi band play and all the House leadership walk in, and of course the governor's State of State address. But saw a lot of people who I know. It was also another reminder of just how small of a state we're in, what a small community it is, which again just sort of underscores the fact that what happens here really is going to happen, is going to impact people from every corner of the state. So it's exciting to be covering it with you, Dan. Um, and yeah, it's just been kind of a whirlwind, and I'll be coming back periodically as the session moves forward to help out with more coverage. What is on your radar maybe for, I know tomorrow, Friday is going to be maybe a bit of a slower day, but for coming days and maybe next week, do you have a sense of what we should anticipate?
Yeah, I think as we enter the second week of the session, a lot of the committees will be ramped up. I mean, some of them already have and have already heard some bills, but I think the bills will really start moving through that committee process. We've already seen, I believe, more than 100 bills introduced in each chamber, the House and the Senate. So going to start moving here a little more quickly. As we talked about a little earlier, I mean, some of the bills will be actually moving off the House or Senate floors in the coming days, which is kind of unique. But the bulk of the action, I think, is going to be in committees, at least for the next week or so, as we move into the kind of the real meat of the session. And so I think another thing we're keeping an eye on is the governor's issuing some messages, which kind of authorize consideration of different bills. As a lot of folks know, in a 30-day session is usually limited to budgetary matters and other issues that the governor adds for consideration. So a lot of people trying to get messages from the governor for their bills so they can be considered. Otherwise, they're kind of effectively sidelined for the 30-day session. So that's another thing to keep an eye on. We'll be seeing which of those bills might be moving forward with a message, which won't. I think, some issues we'll really be keeping an eye on are obviously the medical compacts, medical malpractice, a lot of those public safety bills you mentioned, also some environment bills that some of our colleagues may be helping out with as well. But I think the governor really trying to, trying to solidify her legacy. And she told me she doesn't like talking about her legacy too much yet, but she did say she's proud of a lot of accomplishments and isn't quite ready to exit the roundhouse quite yet.
Hmm. Yeah. I guess talking about your legacy means something's coming to an end. So I guess that makes sense why she wouldn't want to discuss that too early. But it's obviously there are a lot of swirling rumors about what she might do next. And I know there've also been some other political races that we've seen sort of represented in the roundhouse. We saw some gubernatorial candidates. There's been some, mayoral leadership from throughout the state, and we should also remind listeners that Espanola is headed for its mayoral election in March. So we've seen a couple other faces around the roundhouse as well, which has been interesting to see.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's a good point, especially in a 30-day session that we do have this election season kind of, on the horizon coming into view. At least I counted at least 4 gubernatorial candidates present on the opening day. Sam Bregman and Deb Haaland, who are both Democrats. Then Greg Hull, who's the Rio Rancho mayor, and Steve Lanier, who are both Republicans, were also present. So I think it's clear that as soon as the session ends, a lot of the focus is going to shift over to the campaign trail. But um, I did get a chance to talk to Deb Haaland a little bit today. She was also in the roundhouse for a rally here, and so I think a lot of them are keeping a close eye on what happens, during the session, and especially whoever's elected governor will take office in January, which is now less than a year away and only halfway through the state's fiscal year. So, politics never stops, even in the roundhouse, and always kind of thinking about what's next.
All right. Well, thanks, Dan. We will keep readers and listeners apprised of everything new happening in the Roundhouse. Be sure to read the journal in print, but also visit our website, abqjournal.com. Follow us on all the socials. I know, Dan, you're posting some regular updates. I'm posting the occasional update on LinkedIn. So, yeah, stay tuned. There'll be a lot
Yeah,
more in coming days.
it's going to be busy, and we appreciate you following along with our coverage, like John said. And you can also find all our podcasts, on abqjournal.com, also on YouTube. And a lot of our colleagues have great podcasts as well. So trying to do our best to keep everyone updated in all the different ways that folks get their news these days.